Parents across the U.S. blaming their local school boards and teachers unions across the country for the decline in student learning loss and social development. President of Parents Defending Education, Nicole Neily, joining us this morning on the National Desk with more on this. Welcome and good morning.
Good morning.
So, Nicole, we are hearing more parents say school closures during the pandemic implemented by local school boards and pushed by teachers unions led to learning loss and social development. Tell us more about this. What has been the impact of social development and learning during the pandemic?
Sure. Well, certainly this is the kind of thing that parents have been screaming about for 2 years, that children were nervous, children were apprehensive, having masks on delayed their speech development and human interaction with other people. And the NAEP scores that came out this past week from the Department of Education really show, now we have numbers to put to this, about the amount of learning loss specifically that hit children in reading, writing, and mathematics, and how we have just erased 20 years of gains over the course of 2 years thanks to having schools shut down. It's appalling, and it's something that we as parents knew, and now there's proof, and it's horrifying.
Right. Speaking of that proof and that report, America's 9-year-olds fell during the first 2 years of the pandemic in math. In fact, the average score for 9-year-old students fell 7 percentage points, and in reading, as you mentioned, 5 percentage points. That's how much they fell. How long will it take students to rebound from the effects of this pandemic, and which students were most affected?
Unfortunately, I think we're going to have a lost generation in many cases. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of students who simply fell out of the education system altogether. They have fallen through the cracks. We don't know where they are. They didn't graduate. They didn't show up. But sadly, the kinds of students who were most impacted were disadvantaged students. I mean, again, those are average learning losses, but for minority students in particular, some of those drops were astonishing. I mean, major double-digit drops in Washington, D.C. in particular, hitting Black students, hitting Hispanics in particular. And so, I mean, the people who have been screaming equity from the rooftops and using that as an excuse to meddle in our schools are the same ones that have disproportionately hurt those students. And so there is a really sad irony to this. And again, it's questionable whether for some students they will ever make this up.
And what role did teachers unions and school boards play in these COVID guidelines on schools? Just how big of an influence do these teachers unions have on these school boards and on policy?
An absolutely massive impact. And sadly, what we're seeing right now are people like Randy Weingarten trying to rewrite history and say, oh, no, we wanted schools open. We have seen the public records requests from groups like Americans for Public Trust that showed the collusion between the American Federation of Teachers and the CDC working to keep schools closed. The Chicago Teachers Union tweeted in December 2020 that the push to reopen schools was rooted in racism, sexism, and misogyny. Parents who wanted their children in school because they feared this learning loss were mocked, were shamed. And so let's not let the teachers unions rewrite history. We know what happened, and we know who is to blame for this.
And the irony of much of this is that virtual learning forced parents to really see what was happening previously inside the classrooms and revealed what their children were learning. And so now we've got these grassroots organizations like yours, hundreds of thousands of moms and dads now fired up. Change has already come to some school districts and change on the horizon for others. How can parents become involved, Nicole? What have you found to be the most effective method and way for parents to create change and have their voices be heard?
Sure. So the first thing is just to keep an eye on what's going on. I mean, demand that your school actually address this learning loss. Our children are in school for 7 or 8 hours during the day, and it is a zero sum. Every hour that a school diverts to a program like social emotional learning or social justice issues is an hour that students are not spending making up those, learning those things that they didn't learn for 2 years. And so asking, keeping an eye on things, and then demanding change. And if you don't get the answer you want from your teacher, talk to the principal, talk to the school board, talk to the superintendent, but elevate and never give up, because, it's not reported in mainstream outlets. But fortunately, thanks to people like you, we are hearing and we are getting out the word that parents are making a difference. School boards are canceling contracts with equity consultants instead to redirect those funds to things like tutoring programs. And so demand change, because your children deserve it. And you, at the end of the day, are the only one who will be your child's best advocate.
Nicole Neily with Parents Defending Education. We appreciate you joining us this morning here on the National Desk. Have a great week.